Ahmida, back with Jadaliyya to discuss the current situation in Libya.
Thank you, Noura, for having me a second time.
We hope to have you numerous times, hopefully with increasingly better news.
Yes.
Libya today, we know that on February 17th, the Libyan-styled revolution akin to Egypt's March 25th movement began. But however, the differences between the two are both horrific and striking, as Gaddafi brutally responded to calls for reform and then regime change with indiscriminate violence against his own civilians whom he has a duty to protect. Last week, on March 18th, the UN Security Council passed a resolution that imposed a no-fly zone, and the next day, on March 19th, French and British forces began bombardment on Libya that was supported by the Arab League and specifically by Qatar, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. Today, there are increasing forces who are joining this fold, most recently Turkey, which has joined the NATO forces in order to impose the naval blockade. And we're excited to have you, Professor Ahmida, to help us make sense of these recent developments and the current situation on the ground.
Thank you for having me.
So just to begin, can you begin by briefing us a general update of what's happening on the ground since the French and the UK began their bombardment, since this external intervention began last week?
Well, what we have so far is really a very bloody and unfortunate situation where the regime, or what remained of the regime, is still clinging to power. And Gaddafi unleashed his security brigades, supported by mercenaries and also other recruited Europeans. Some are coming from the Polisario, unfortunately. Some are from Chad, Niger, and Mali. They are joining his indigenous groups inside Libya. And literally, they assaulted major Libyan cities. We're talking about the city of Zawiya, the city of Zintan, the city of Misrata, and also coming from the west and advancing to Sirte and planning to attack the eastern region that's rebelled against the regime. The casualties of people who were killed or injured is really the worst since the uprising began in Tunis. And at the same time, we were fearing that the casualty would be even more horrific had his armies marched to Benghazi and to Baida and to the rest of the eastern region. We know that people are adamant about defending themselves, and the regime showed no hesitation since it declared people who are opposing it drug addicts, Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda agents, and even rats. When you do that, you do humanize the people you are facing, and if you do that, you could kill them, crush them, gas them, whatever you do in that kind of frame of mind. So I think the Libyan uprising is now reaching a critical stage. And even though I wasn't really crazy about the no-fly zone, one could say that it was justified, at least in a limited way, in halting this assault on Libyan cities.
So there's been much talk that most of the assault against the rebels has not been an aerial assault, but rather shelling from boats along the coast as well as ground forces. And so the calls for no-fly zone for some critics seem to be disingenuous, for not being helpful. You seem to disagree with that. Can you tell us more?
I had my own reason to be reluctant about it, but also the choices are limited. What other choices you have? And the tanks, the launching missiles, vehicles have caused horrendous casualties in Libyan cities. Not to mention, of course, many of these cities were besieged, and the regime cut electricity and cut water, and people are squeezed, and God forbid there will be starvation and hunger inside these cities. So I think the gravity of the situation was so big that I could understand why such no-fly zone could be justified. However, I have to add, Noura, that this accepting such a limited operation, one thing, supported by the United Nations, the Arab League, and the international community, going or being tempted to have an imperial adventure in Libya would be the most disastrous thing that could happen. I'm talking about military intervention.